I would like to invoke the Divine Mother first. Om Tatsaviturvaram Rupam Jyoti Parasya Dhimahi Yanna Satyena Deepayet. Thank you everyone. Thank you Indic Academy. It is really challenging to present a paper after so many things have been said. But I will try my best. So my paper is on Varna that symbolizes the four forms of the Shakti. And it is more challenging because I think Varna is the one institution or idea in Hinduism in which tons and tons of scholarship has been done. But I'll still try. Next slide, sir. So, just to give a background about the dominant narrative in academia about Varna. Next slide, sir. Yeah, to give a dominant narrative that is prevailing in the academia, Varna is an all India hierarchy. And the hierarchy is immutable, and this hierarchy is present throughout India. And this hierarchy is actually a product of Brahminical supremacy because the Brahmins have placed themselves on the top. And yeah, so because it will set the context. Okay, so M.N. Srinivasan and M.N. Srinivas actually differentiates Varna from the Jatis through these four points of Varna. Next slide, sir. So as I was saying, those things that it establishes Brahminical supremacy. And Dr. B.R. Ambedkar in his work, Who Were the Sudras, mentions that the Sudras were actually the erstwhile Kshatriyas of the Indo-Aryan society who had constant fears with Brahmins, and the Brahmins denied the Upanayana to them. So that led to a social degeneracy. Louis Dumont, who is another sociologist, mentions about the origin of Varna institution in India in his work Homo Hierarchicus, as from using many theories like the Aryan migration theory, the racial segregation theory that leads to the concept of purity and pollution between different Varnas, where the concept of untouchability also comes, and also the diffusionist theory. So there are many works that has been done in the Varna. Next slide, sir. But as we all know that these ideologies are mainly mental constructs, and these are completely not untrue, but they are bound by their time, space and causation. They are bound by the scholarship that a scholar receives by his or her understanding of the institution and his or her own sanskaras and vrittis. But in our tradition, we have the luxury of rishis. Rishis are actually the seers of truth. Those are mantra dastas, and they can clear the haze that lies and can tell us what is the truth actually. So through the eyes of a rishi, I will try to decode the idea of Varna, and the rishi will be Sri Aurobindo, who is a rishi of the modern India. Next slide, sir. Prior to that, let me explain to you the idea of cycle of society that Sri Aurobindo has given to us. It is basically an evolutionary progress of society, but it is an helical structure. Just as an helix moves in a circular form, but after a completion of a circle, it goes up to a next level. Similarly, the society also moves in an evolutionary progress, but after every progress, it rises up to a certain level. And to explain this cycle of society, he gives 5 stages of society. And those are symbolic, typal, conventional, rationalistic and subjective. And the note of caution that these classifications are not rigid, And this obviously we can't substitute the zigzags of feminine prakriti into a mental straight line. Next slide, sir. And the first category is the symbolic age. Now, what is a symbolic age? The so-called primitive age is actually a symbolic age as per Sri Aurobindo. Our Vedic age is actually symbolic age. Now we have to understand what is a symbolic age. In those symbolic age, the culture is highly imaginative and creative. It is the religion, the rituals are hugely creative. And how does this creativity where does this creativity arises? He mentions that all the symbols are actually something which man feels to be present behind himself and his life and his activities. The truth of our existence, the truth of this cosmos is represented in the form of rituals, in the form of institutions, in the form of ideas in this symbolic age. The divine, the gods, the vast and the deep, unnameable, hidden, living and mysterious nature of things are everything a symbol for this man in this symbolic age. All his religious and social institutions, all the moments and phases of his life are to him symbols in which he seeks to express what he knows or guesses of the mystic influences that are behind his life and shape and govern or at the least intervene in his movements. Next slide, sir. To give one example, let us refer to the Purusha Suktam of the Rig Veda. We all know that in the Purusha Suktam has been highly misrepresented by the Western Indologists, and they mention that the hierarchical nature of the Hindu society actually comes from this Purusha Suktam or Hindu philosophy, where the Brahmins come from the head, the Kshatriyas from the arms, Vaisyas from thighs and Sudras from the feet. But there is a point to be noted here that actually what the man in the symbolic age is actually trying to say us, that the absolute or the Sat principle is actually that is unmanifest, that has no ending, no beginning, and that is the true source of our existence, and that is the cosmic Purusha. But that Purusha has been given a symbolical form of a man, and from that man the four varnas are emerging out from different parts of his body. That's the symbolic representation. Next, we can go to how does this Purusha actually manifest, because the Purusha is immobile. He cannot manifest by himself. Here comes the concept of Adya Shakti or the Divine Mother or the Chit Shakti. The Chit Shakti is the one who stands above the world and links the creation to the ever unmanifest mystery of the Supreme. The Chit Shakti is the conscious force that actually manifests the absolute in the creation. She is the bridge, or she is the Ichha Shakti within the Purusha that actually leads to the manifestation of this whole universe. And the Supreme is manifest in her forever as the everlasting Sachidananda, manifested through her in the world. So Supreme is also, the Supreme or the Purusha is actually manifest in her and also manifested through her. Next slide, sir. And Sri Aurobindo here brings out the four forms, the four powers and personalities of the Adya Shakti or the Divine Mother. So what are the four powers of the Mother? The four powers of the Mother are four of her outstanding personalities, portions and embodiments of her divinity, through whom she acts on her creatures, orders and harmonies, and harmonizes her creation in the worlds and directs the working out of her thousand forces. So the Divine Mother is also represented through four of our powers and personalities, and for the Mother is one, but she comes before us with differing aspects. Many are our powers and personalities, many are emanations and vibhutis that do her work in the universe. So the Divine Mother has four forms or four personalities, and Sri Aurobindo mentions the four personalities as Maheshwari, Mahakali, Mahalakshmi and Mahasaraswati. And please note down the four words that are written below the four forms of the Divine Mother: knowledge, strength, harmony and perfection. Next slide, sir. So the first personality is Maheshwari. So she represents actually the Brahminical principle. Please note, I am referring to the Brahminical principle and not to any class or any individual. And her personality is calm, wideness and comprehending wisdom. and she is the conscious force behind the vast intangible knowledge. The high tranquil power of the universe is her creation. So if you look carefully, the characteristics that defines a Brahmin today are actually the traits or actually the personalities of Maheshwari. She is the conscious force, and all that is knowledge in this universe is actually created by her. And the high tranquil power, the tranquility of a Brahmin, or the tranquil power that is within every one of us, is the creation of Maheshwari. Next slide, sir. Similarly, Mahakali, she represents the traits of Kshatriya principle. And what are those traits? Those traits are splendid strength, irresistible passion, impetuous swiftness, and world-shaking force. So she is the conscious force behind the warrior spirit that breaks every limit and ignorance. So the force that is within a microcosm and the force that is in the macrocosm of the Mahakali is actually the Kshatriya principle. Next slide, sir. The Mahalakshmi represents the Vaishya principle, and here the personalities that she manifests are sweetness, beauty, attraction, opulence of wealth. So she is the conscious force in the universe that helps achieve harmony and beauty in thoughts, in feelings, mind, and in every act of inward and outward life. So that is the principle of the Mahalakshmi as per Sri Aurobindo. Next slide, sir. And Mahasaraswati represents the Sudra principle, and here in the personality of Mahasaraswati are actually order and perfection in work. So she is the conscious force behind the strong, the tireless, the careful and efficient builder, organizer, administrator, technician, artisan and classifier of the worlds. So every work that we do, there needs to be a kind of perfection and there needs to be a kind of order in society. That is the power and personality of Mahasaraswati, and she manifests those principles in the macrocosm and also in the microcosm. So, just I want to mention that all these four personalities are actually supplementary or complementary to each other. They are within each one of us in a symbolic age. And for example, the Mahakali, who represents the Kshatriya principle, to knowledge she gives a conquering might, brings to beauty and harmony high and mounting movement, and imparts to the slow and difficult labor after perfection and impetuous that multiplies the power and shortens the long way. So here you can see how the Kshatriya principle is actually complementing the knowledge. To the knowledge he gives the true knowledge is being conquered by the work of a Kshatriya to the work of Mahakali. To the Mahasaraswati or the Sudra principle, she actually gives a perfection and an impetuous that actually multiplies the work of then order or perfection in the society or in the cosmos. Similarly, Mahasaraswati, or who is the Sudra principle, actually to the all work of the other powers leans on her for its completeness, for her assures the material foundation, elaborates the stuff of detail and erects and reverts the armor of the structure. So to the all three principle, the Mahasaraswati or the Sudra principle are actually giving a material foundation and elaboration of the stuff of the sniff details and erects and reverts the armor of the structure. So she gives the final touch, Mahasaraswati or the Sudra principle. So this is the idea of a symbolic age in where the four varnas are actually in every individual and in every and in the whole society as well. And if we look at the Purusha Suktam, where the four varnas are actually emerging out of the body of the cosmic Purusha, are actually representing the works of the Adya Shakti, who is in our four forms are giving birth to four personalities of our own self, that is the Maheshwari, Mahakali, Mahasaraswati and Mahalakshmi. Next slide, sir. And yeah, so next it brings us to the Swabhava and Swadharma principle. So in the essays on Gita, Sri Aurobindo mentions that Swabhava or one's true nature and Swadharma, that is one's right law of action, principle are not oriented primarily towards external socio-economic or cultural forms. So the Swabhava and Swadharma principle are actually the inner subjective and universal meaning, and it has a spiritual sense and direction primarily first, then the outward action. And this Swabhava and Swadharma principle, how does this principle come into existence? We all know there are three gunas of the Mula Prakriti or the Para Prakriti, that are Sattva, Rajas and Tamas, and that determines the Swabhava of a jiva or an individual. And based on this Swabhava, a jiva might have a dominant power or personality that are referred to the four Shaktis. And that dominant thing can also be contextual. There is no need of that being a lifetime thing also. And based on this Swabhava of a jiva, the Swadharma is actually determined. And the Swadharma is the one's right law of action. And this Swadharma is actually the unique aspiration of a jiva for evolutionary progress. And it is actually aligned to the four forms of the Shakti that are, as I mentioned. And these are aligned to the four forms of the Shakti. So the evolution of his jiva is according to one's own nature and inner law of action to realize these highest spirits of the Divine Mother and operate thereafter in the socio-economic and cultural worlds. So first, in an evolutionary progress of a jiva, it is essential to grab these four spirits as per one Swabhava and Swadharma, and after realizing those four spirits, then one needs to manifest them in the outer socio-economic and cultural world. So this is the whole principle of the Varna that has been present in the symbolic case. Now, ma'am, do I have some little more time? Yeah, I'll take 2 minutes. Yeah. Now, just I'll complete the whole cycle. So this is the idea of the symbolic case. Now the question arises, but why did it get lost? Here comes the cycle. The next step of the cycle is the typal age. In the typal age, all the social ideals, the moral ideals, the ethics of the society, the psychological typification takes place in the society based on this four principle of Brahmin, Kshatriya, Vaishya and Shudra, based on the four Shaktis. So here actually the dharmas are being codified, but the truth is not lost. That we have to keep in mind, that in a typal society or in the next stage of the society, the truth is as much present as in the symbolic or the symbolic age, but there you can say the truth is the secondary thing, the morals, the ethics, the ideas, the dharma is the primary thing. Third stage is the conventional stage, where slowly the truth recedes away from the society and we are left with only the rites and the rituals, where no doubt it gives us lot many things, but the truth has been lost from the masses, from the mass consciousness. At this stage of a society, it paves the way for a rationalistic or individualistic idea of a society, because a youthful mind or mind that is searching for truth sees do not gets its answer in the conventional stage or the third stage. So he wants to break down all these rituals and rites, and he finds the truth only in his empirical self or only in his empirical body. And Sri Aurobindo mentions that this is an inevitable step in the cycle of society and we can't stop it. But because the work of this is to break the conventions that have lost the truth from the inside, or the spirit has been lost, but it paves the way for the next completion of the cycle, that is the subjective age or the spiritual age, where it again comes back to where the cycle is completed, but there has been a shift in the consciousness of the society as well, and the inner spirit are again rejuvenated and the inner spirits are again rejuvenated, but it can be in the different forms, different structure. The spirit of the different forms of the Shakti will be rejuvenated, but the forms, the institutions, the ideas may be different. Yeah. With this, thank you. I think we are in a transition from the rationalistic or individualistic state. We are still, it's more rationalistic and individualistic stage, but Sri Aurobindo has also mentioned that there are signs of a change towards subjectivity. And if we also deeply contemplate, we'll see that we are in a phase of transition as well. Because
can you just idea about the subjective state? What will be the
Actually, the ideas of a subjective stage are the concrete ideas. It's very difficult to give because that's a work in that's in the future. But the general idea is that the spirit of the universe, or the spirit of Hindu cosmology, or the spirit of our own creation, that will come into mass consciousness. And this may be in the form, and the outer forms may be different. The institutions, the rituals, the rites, those things will be different, but the spirit will again get rejuvenated, just like in the symbolic age.
So it's a kind of a revival.
Yeah.
So, your classification is this, so is it taking time?
No. Actually, this my work is completely based on the readings of Sri Aurobindo. So he mentions about these 4 forms of the Shakti, and this idea of Purushottama and Adya Shakti, and also he mentions in a separate work about the cycle of society.
No, and the connection with the different caste principles.
Yeah.
The Maheshwari part. I find very, very interesting because you are unconsciously also reflecting the other Shastra. I know a lot of details of the other Shastra. So he has started with a description of the 4 varnas, and this description of actually what the Shudras did and is exactly what you have described here as Mahasaraswati. And as you know, that was a reflection of things as society as it existed in the modern period. So this kind of correspondence is very, very interesting. Even the words that we're using, scientific, partisan, etc. So the term he uses is Karushlavka, which actually translates as exactly that. So that's a very, very interesting kind of correlation. Yes.
Also, just what you said, the association of Mahasaraswati with Sundars can actually be a very revolutionary idea in us.
Yes, absolutely.
It has very difficult to reconcile or even explain people who don't understand how world is different from class system.
Yes.
At the point when you start rationally arguing with them, this is going to be very revolutionary.
Yes. Although you can very rationally argue with them because again, I am a sociologist who studied caste a lot. So when you mention Homo hierarchicus and you mention Louis Dumont, he has made a lot of these structures and a lot of these theories which are not based on evidence.
Yeah.
He himself recognizes that this is just a theory he has set up. And why did he set up that theory? Because he wanted to contrast us, Homo hierarchicus, with ideal kind of society of Homo equalis. So his whole idea was to tell the French about themselves and their equality by talking about this regressive society which had no equality. So it's a heavily ideologically loaded and theoretically full of assumptions. So anytime anyone talks to us, most of our current ideas about class come from Louis Dumont and Homo hierarchicus. This way or that way, they can all be traced back to Louis Dumont and Celesta Bouquet. So you can tell them that go read Homo hierarchicus, he himself admits that he does not have evidence for this kind of purity versus pollution. And then you must also read Western foundation of the caste system and the works of S. Balagangadhar and Steele. So on the subject of caste, of course, I mean, that's completely full confidence on its own. So there are no more questions as we have to say that was very, very interesting and very
At last, I would like to offer my prayers at the feet of the Sri Aurobindo and the Mother. Namaste to all.